This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest has dedicated her entire career to rescuing and protecting victims of child sex trafficking. She's the founder and president of a groundbreaking and vitally important nonprofit organization called Children of the Night, which was the first and still one of very few organizations in the world devoted to the development of comprehensive, specialized programs and education for child sex trafficking victims who need critical intervention to break away from the abuse they've suffered and have a chance to live a safe, happy, successful life. Since its creation in 1979, Children of the Night has operated a variety of programs for America's prostituted children, including a 24-hour toll-free nationwide hotline, a drop-in center in Los Angeles, street programs throughout the Western United States, and a world-class shelter home in California, where over 3,000 children have lived and received comprehensive case management and on-site schooling. Since 1979, Children of the Night has rescued over 10,000 American children from prostitution, which makes this organization the most prominent and successful anti-child sex trafficking program in the world. Our guest is the world's leading expert in rescuing child sex trafficking victims. She holds a PhD in sociology and anthropology and is a lawyer and active member of the California State Bar. She has trained thousands of law enforcement personnel and is frequently called upon to provide expert testimony in high-profile prosecutions of child sex traffickers. Her pioneering work with child sex trafficking victims has been a blueprint for academics, researchers, law enforcement, social service providers, and legislators throughout the world. She's received many prestigious awards for her groundbreaking work, most notably the President's Volunteer Action Award, presented to her by President Ronald Reagan, the Children's Friend Award from Child Help, the Women's Achievement Award from the Dashu International Center for Students and Scholars at UCLA, the Award of Appreciation from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the National Caring Award. And her portrait hangs in the Frederick Douglass Museum and Hall of Fame for Caring Americans in Washington, D.C. Our guest has been profiled on the CBS TV show 60 Minutes, and her life was portrayed in a 1985 TV movie entitled Children of the Night, starring Kathleen Quinlan. I'm deeply honored to welcome Dr. Lois Lee to our show. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Harvey.
How did you become involved in the world of child sex trafficking?
Well, I was a PhD student at UCLA, working on my doctorate's degree in sociology, and my professors told me I had to do quantitative analysis and wanted me to study census data and predict the next race riots in Chicago, and I thought that was very boring. And through the American Sociological Association, one of my mentors introduced me to two ACLU members who had sued the Oakland Police Department for not arresting an equal number of customers. And they won, and it meant that the police could not bring in a prostitute into court unless they brought the customer. And they had suggested, why don't you do that with LAPD? And I was very young. I was 25 years old, and I thought, what a great idea. And everybody thought I was crazy. And I guess it was a little crazy. But I did it, and created quite an uproar. I had a lawyer, a very respectable lawyer, do the case, and we challenged the equal enforcement of the prostitution law. I was teaching at Cal State Dominguez and funded by the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, which infuriated the police that I was funded by the federal government and suing them, and analyzed thousands of police reports for my dissertation, and found that, most of the arrests were female prostitutes or male prostitutes, and only a few were customers. And I guess I'm responsible for the reason that men are arrested for soliciting prostitutes today. In that, there had been a Hillside Strangler investigation, Hillside Strangler murders. They had killed, I think, 10, 12 girls, strangled them, laid them nude on a hillside, tortured them. They were all young prostitutes for the most part. And I met girls in the court who one was a victim, and they knew other victims, and they were intimately involved. And they started talking to me, and I called the police one night when we knew we had him cornered. We knew where he was, where he made the phone call, where he took the girl, and the police refused to go because she was just a whore. And the next morning, of course, that was the location they'd taken her. And I'd called a reporter at KMBC, Warren Wilson, at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, "Get up, we got another one." He took out a camera crew. He said, "You're right, her car's here. I can't get in the building, security building." And I was not going to go out there on the streets and take them on myself. I wanted the police to do their job. And I was very vocal about that. And the next morning, sure enough, they bungled it even more. Because I told them he's in the building. And they had asked everybody, for their driver's license. And he talked his way out of giving his driver's license. And he was right there in front of them. And the people that were the landlords, I told them they're going to run. They steal money. They rent these empty rooms for cash. And they know who was in that room. And they said, "Oh, what do you know?" And sure enough, they ran off with rents 3 months later. And I was so angry. I went on the news and I said, "If you're involved in the prostitution business and you think you know who the Hillside Strangler is and you don't want to talk to the cops, don't call them, call me," and put my home phone number up. And didn't quite know what I was doing. I was brave, but I was very also righteous, and I knew I was right and they were wrong, and I knew that they were doing a terrible job. And I'm very thankful to KNBC and KFWB and KABC, who gave me full-time reporters, and we took the calls and we covered those streets, massage parlors. I became a legend overnight among organized crime, strip club owners, pornographers, pimps, call girls, you name it, and was able to put together information and find the key witnesses. And I too testified as an expert in the case, and it changed my life. At this point in my life, I have mixed emotions about it, because I was really going just to be a college professor, spend my summers in Paris, write a book on prostitution, and live at the beach. And I got derailed, and it's been very traumatic and dramatic and very hard. And now that I'm older, I look back, I'm during the time that I was setting up these programs and helping these kids, there wasn't any time to think. I was driven. It took over my life, and I had an answer for everything and developed programs around their needs. And thank God people came to help me.
So it was initially this one investigation that triggered your desire to create Children of the Night. Is that how it happened?
Yes, it ruined my life.
Well,
Yeah.
It ruined your life in a good way. Tell me about the services and programs that Children of the Night operates.
Well, today everything we do is mobilized, because I'm constantly at odds with the Department of Justice. I taught them about how these young ladies could be very helpful in investigations and prosecutions of pimps, and how they were willing participants to testify, but they needed to be treated with dignity. They didn't need to be held in a cell, and that the police and the Department of Justice should come to where they were and interview the kids, and that they were entitled to victims' rights. And we put hundreds of the major pimps in jail. What happened was that they thought, well, we don't have to put up with her. We'll just put them on material witness holds, hold them in juvenile hall until they testify, and they'll be at our beck and call. And if they don't have pimps, then we'll turn them over to foster care. And so then they said, you can just get your kids from foster care, which was not a workable situation for me, because social workers are afraid to sign anything. I had always received kids from their parents because social workers wouldn't take them because they were prostitutes, and that was illegal. And juvenile court judges wouldn't put them in treatment programs because they were not crimes against property. So parents would just sign their kids over to me. So if we were going horseback riding, I just signed, and we all went horseback riding every Friday, or we went snowboarding, and, we ran it like a home, and it was a very special place, and every child who ever lived there will tell you that. And because of that, I couldn't deal with one social worker saying this child could go and this child couldn't go, and you have the haves and the haves not. I'm not a government person. That's not who I am. And I'm a trailblazer. And so I took my program back to the streets and increased my client caseload from 90%. And we're back on the streets fighting with Crips in some of the most dangerous streets in America, Figueroa corridor in particular. at the request of the Southeast Police Department, because with laws changing and decriminalization of prostitution, there's not a whole lot they can do. So you have to come up with ways to intervene.
A lot of people assume that child prostitutes are only girls, not boys, but that's not true, is it?
No, it's not true. They're 30% are boys. And you see less boys now because of the organization of prostitution. And in some ways, I mean, for girls, it's like they're tainted for the rest of their lives. If they get married and they have kids, they don't tell anybody. They have to live with that secret. Where boys have this very accepting gay community willing to accept them, because many people have gone through that as a rite of passage as a child through sexual abuse. And so there's a much more understanding and an assimilation, and you don't have to hide your past so much. And it's interesting because many of the boys have brought me some of my biggest contributors because they are quite open about talking about it. Now they may be executives in hospitals and stuff, and they don't hide it. Where the girls, it's like nobody can really know. But the numbers, it is just different, and the numbers are very, very similar.
Now, you've done a lot of work on identifying the techniques that pimps use to lure and manipulate young people into becoming prostitutes. What can you tell us about how these pimps operate?
Well, what they do is, first you have to understand the premise that the homes in which the girls come from are far worse than life with a pimp. If you don't get that, you don't understand it at all. So if you're born and you're raised in a crack house, and I don't know how to say it appropriately, but you're sold as a baby for sex services so your mother can have drugs. And as you age, you continue to be sold. And at 9, a man may be having sex with you on one bed and your mother's nodding out from heroin and the drug dealer she just sold you to. And now at 11, you're on the streets and you're on a bus bench in an area you shouldn't be. And along comes a car full of guys and they go, "Hey, you want to go to a party?" And you go, "Yeah, I want to go to a party." And she goes to a party and he says, "Hey, you don't have to wait to have sex with these people that come to you. I can teach you how to have sex with men and how you can control it and how you can make them pay you for it. And you can have your hair done and you can have nice clothes and you can have your nails done." And that tends to be the entree. There's still a lot of sweet talking. There's a lot of it's controlled by gangs now where they're jumped in and they're gang raped. But the police are not really effective at breaking the tie of dealing with these children because they don't have resources. And the gang members will retaliate against the families. We had a situation where a mom called me and she said her daughter was with the pimps, gang members, Crips, downtown Los Angeles, and LAPD was there, and the Crips circled her and pulled their guns, and the police left. They were outnumbered. And she said, if they find out we called the police, they'll kill my grandmother. They'll kill her dog. They'll kill her family. And so she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, does she talk to you? Does she call you?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Can she ever get away from him where she can get into an Uber and say she's going to see a customer? Can we start moving her away from him those ways?" And she said, "Yes." And so we have our strategies and our resources to where we'll have her picked up in an Uber and taken to another location, switched to another Uber or Lyft, and taken right to the airport where there's lots of security, put on a plane and go back home. The problem is that many times these girls are willing participants, and there's a love bond with the man who abused them. And if they call him and tell them where they are, they put their own families in danger. So it's very complicated. It's not a job for the police. It can't be done by the police. It can't be done without, a sophisticated social service system. And so I respond to whatever the problem is, and I'm pretty quick on my feet. And there are many police and prosecutors just say, "Call Lois Lee, she'll tell you how to do it."
Well, it's clear to me, even at this juncture in the interview, that you really do know how to do it. And you're raising a lot of alarm bells for me, kind of like PTSD, because I spent 26 years in a courtroom dealing with this. Now, you've talked about the risk factors that make a child most vulnerable to being lured into child prostitution. Tell me, what about the pimps? Is there a particular kind of personality profile that becomes a pimp?
Yes. Pimps tend to be raised by single moms. They witnessed the woman they love the most, which is their mother, be victimized by domestic violence, raped, tortured. They're too little to do anything about it. In the process, they identify with the pimp and they become like him. But the one thing that and I've helped the police with this a lot, is one thing that a pimp will always do is he will always take care of his mother. So the money that he earns from his prostitutes, he'll make sure that his mother has a home. He'll make sure that, his mother has, is taken care of, that her medical services are taken care of. And oftentimes we're able to put the mother in prison too, because, she may have gone to the train station to pick up the train tickets or bought the plane tickets. You can tie her to the pimping in some way. It's all a very sad situation. There's no winners. There's nothing happy. A pimp's lifestyle is his life. The term of his career is not very long, except in rare circumstances. And then he may have other younger pimps working for him. It's an area that goes unnoticed, and there's not a lot of sympathy. There's as much contempt for the girls and the victims as there are for the pimps and among the general society. We've created a narrative to where it's the boogeyman who reaches into the bedroom and grabs a little girl, and loving mom and dad are in the other room watching TV and she's kidnapped. That is not true. It's not true. That's not what happens. So, but it makes it more palatable to try and sell the notion that sex trafficking, is a sad thing and the victims deserve help.
Well, one of the most frustrating things for me when I was a judge about sex trafficking cases was the extreme reluctance of the child victims to testify against their pimps. What can be done about that?
Well, they have to be provided alternatives. Are you going to testify and then be put right back on the street? Are you going to be held in jail? There needs to be resources, places they can go. Can they go to school? Can they get clothes? Can they get their dental work taken care of? Can they still have their hair done? Can you offer them the same things the pimp does? Can you give them a stable living environment? Can you help them get off drugs? Can you get them therapy for a number of years? Can you reunite them with their children? And cops can't do that, or they talk a good game like they can. When we were, doing all these cases, the 200 cases, over 200 cases, we had vice cops we worked with. You don't find this with feds, but we had vice cops we worked with that would be the guy that would give the girl away at her wedding, that would go to their high school graduations. We would all go. You have to integrate her back into society. You don't just use her again like a pimp and put her back on the streets. She's going to get killed.
Yeah, I always felt that very strongly when I was a judge. What do you think of how the courts deal with child sex trafficking cases?
I think the courts are pretty good. I think judges always wish they knew more. I think they appreciate a good expert witness that can explain to them the processes. What's happened is because this issue has become so popularized, there's all kinds of people with credentials who claim to be experts who don't do a really good job of explaining it. And there's very little resources, for the kids to motivate them. I mean, I had a little girl once, they called me into Oregon and said, she's 13 years old. This child was so afraid she jumped out of a 3rd-story building to get away from this pimp in the snow. And they said, will you come in and help her testify? I said, sure. So I went in and I said, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to walk down the center and do not make eye contact with him. You're going to be sitting next to the judge. So he's on your side. That's your friend. And I'm going to be sitting in front of you, and you can watch me when you speak, or you can look at the judge when you speak. Can you do this? Do not look at him. She said, I can do this. So as we're walking down the center, of course, she looks at him and she collapses. And we go outside, and she's crying hysterically, and the police, everybody wants to be, oh, you poor thing, and oh, you poor. I said, leave her alone. Leave her alone. I said, you did good. She said, I did good. I said, you did really good. And I said, does somebody have some Pepsi or a soft drink or something? Because she needed something to kind of stimulate her. And I said, please go get that for us. And I said, you did great. I said, you've done it now. I said, so now this is the easy part. Now you just go in and talk. And she said, how did I do good? I said, everybody on that jury saw the effect he had on you. He's down. He's going. He's guilty. So you have to empower them. And that's exactly what happened, rather than to baby them and, oh, you poor thing, and to unempower them. That doesn't work.
Do you think judges are strict enough in sentencing child traffickers?
Yes, I do. And it's been a long time coming. They weren't. When I first started my career, pimping was a misdemeanor in California. And I worked with a senator in California, and we made it a felony and we made it a mandatory sentence. And nobody thought it would pass because the judges don't like mandatory sentences, but they went for it. And that's how we put a lot of guys in jail. And from there, it's just grown. I think that Congress has made a mistake of making sentences too tough, because now instead of pimping a girl, gang members may have them drive the car to where they're going to do a drive-by shooting. So our kids have become more criminalized. You won't find them in jail for prostitution. You won't find them caught at the stage of prostitution. You'll find them really stuck in the criminal justice system for serious crimes. And I think they've made a mistake with that. I think that someone with reason needs to sit down and go over all of those and those codes and make them. There still should be tough. You know, yeah. I always liked the labor camps when we could send them to labor camps. That was my favorite.
Yeah, that's long gone. Now, in most jurisdictions, a child is defined as being under the age of 18, but many child prostitutes lie about their age and pretend to be over 18, don't they?
Yes, because the reason is the pimp gives them a fake ID. And because if you're under 18, a pimp can't get you out of jail because they're not your parent. If you're over 18, you have a fake ID, he just bails you and you're off onto the next jurisdiction. And so it's very sad, because what's happening today is we have a lot of kids who have gone through school and they've become nurses and CNAs and teachers, and they can't clear the background fingerprint check because they were arrested when they were 14 years old with an adult ID for prostitution. And where the criminal justice system is very lenient now, if that happened today, they will not excuse that. And so we have to do a lot of work to seal those records. And of all people, it was in California, it was the California Public Defender's Lobby who opposed it to going back and helping those kids when they were younger.
It's such a complicated world, and you've developed such an insight into each player in the system. I just wonder, are there any other Lois Lees out there doing what you do?
Not really. Not really. I'm pretty quick on my feet. I have a lot of experience, and I'm very aggressive. I mean, I'm not afraid of anybody or anything. And kids come to me with impossible things, or law enforcement. And I've even had DAs, families call me and say the DA says, you know, it's a child pornography case. We can't do it. Have Lois Lee put it together for us. So I try and train people, but it is it's very comprehensive knowledge that I've obtained.
Have you ever been worried about your own personal safety?
I had a stalker for a number of years after me, not because he just wanted me dead, because he wanted to be president of Children of the Night. And that was really awful. And the police were very, very helpful, but it took years to get rid of him, and lots of lawyers and, you know, restraining orders. And then he finally stepped on the wrong person's foot in social services, and they had him face down in the street with a police helicopter over, and he's got bigger problems than me now. But yeah, it was awful. And it was really awful.
Now, Dr. Lee, as you know, there's a huge connection between child sex trafficking and child pornography. When I was a judge, I was amazed at the number of people being charged for downloading and distributing child pornography. It's really become an epidemic, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. It's always been a problem. Back in the day, in the 70s, when I started, there was a police officer who used to write to pedophiles who would exchange literature in the Los Angeles Times and the newspapers. And everybody teased him. His name was Bill Dwarren, because he was so good at it. But the newspapers have been used. It's not, the internet just makes it, the volume is greater. Now, interestingly enough, I met two doctors in Ireland who catalog all of that, and much of it is recycled. And I said, how do you do that? And they said they look at the physical structure of where this is being filmed, such as the light fixtures that can tell you what country, what year. And so they're pretty good, of having a handle on it. But, with cell phones and everything, it's just so easy now. And there are a group of people who do that. And the one thing is that it's easy to catch them if you have enough police resources, because the evidence is right there. But there's a big difference between the pornography and the prostitution.
Well, one of the things that really surprised me when I dealt with child pornography offenders is that they felt they had not done anything wrong because they were just looking at photos and movies that had already been made. They were not making child pornography themselves. So in their minds, the damage had already been done. What do you say to those people?
You're guilty. You're guilty, and anybody who's in that chain of that crime is guilty. And you're going to go to jail too. And for you to want to look at that stuff, there's something wrong with you, and you need treatment. And hopefully we can find you treatment, through the criminal justice controls, through the system that we have. There's nothing okay about it. And, and I think our media, in terms of, you look at our young stars and the way they dress and they perform, and they're very provocative and they're young, it supports that. And I think that they have a responsibility in cleaning that up. And I think they should be sued for contributing to the spread of child pornography. I mean, I'm not afraid. I'll go after anybody who I think's in the chain of hurting children.
Well, that's a very interesting concept because there has been a sexualization of children through music videos and movies and TVs. And it's something that you rarely hear people talk about. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, over the years, we've seen a shift from treating child prostitutes as criminals to treating them for what they are, which is victims. And you've had a lot to do with changing that perception. And I'm very pleased to commend you for that, Dr. Lee.
Thank you. It was hard. Thank you.
You've had a lot to say over the years about how the police and other law enforcement officials have dealt with these vulnerable children. What would you say is the biggest mistake that the police have made in dealing with these kids?
Taking control of them, legal control of them, and not working with the social service agencies. The police cannot do this alone. They need to work side by side with agencies like Children of the Night that can provide alternatives and home for the children. They can't do it alone. That's the biggest mistake. And to think that they can do it, and they do it because it makes their job easier. And I must say that the federal government, the Department of Justice, is far more guilty of that than local law enforcement. They ignore the expertise that vice cops, they've eliminated a lot of the vice units, the expertise that they had in terms of putting these people in jail.
Tell me about your experience with child protection agencies. Have they been effective in protecting children who've been sex trafficked?
No. Initially when this law changed around 2019 and they were given these kids, they were going to do it themselves, but they found very quickly, and they have contempt for these children because oftentimes they put these kids in other homes and they recruit other children for the pimps. So it's a big problem. So they just let them run. But then they started to have to call us because they had to report to judges the progress on these children. And we'd say to them, have you talked to the child? Well, no. Can we talk to the child? And we'd talk to a child and we'd find out what's the solution. What is it you want to do? And this is how you do it. This is what would it be? Do you want to go to a shelter? Okay, nothing that's religious? Fine. Okay, nothing where you have to work? Fine. Could you do this kind of program? Could you go to school? Can you do tutoring? We have a tutoring program where we tutor kids who are involved in prostitution. Even if they're still on the streets, all they need is a Wi-Fi device and Wi-Fi. And we can help you get your high school diploma, and we can help you get in college, and we can help you get scholarships and financial aid. And so nobody really spends time with them because they find contempt. And we had this one young lady we worked with, and then the social worker called back after she'd put us in touch and said, I got to go to court tomorrow. I have to write a report. What is she doing? I said, oh, she's passed her GED. She's in community college. She has a part-time job. She has financial aid. And the social worker cried like a mother. And so they really need to be educated, but they work in a system where they get punished if they care too much or if they do too much. And I know social workers and probation officers who have done things like bought children underwear. It sounds silly, but when you're living in juvenile hall for a year, you're wearing paper underwear. There's nothing better than having regular underwear for some of these kids, but they get punished for using their own money, but there's no way to requisition money for something like that. So the system's designed to prevent any kind of involvement rather than to encourage it.
Well, my perception was always that society seems to see child sex trafficking as a law enforcement problem, but really it's a social problem. It's a child welfare problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is, exactly. And it could be resolved at a very young age. I mean, we know that the best way to determine if a mother is a drug addict is through a hair follicle test. And that should be done in all maternity wards across the country, because many of these children should be removed at that point. If you remember, we had the law where you had to have a car seat to remove a child from a hospital, and people didn't do it. So what did they do? They ended up giving them car seats so they could get the kids out of the hospital and take them right to crack houses. And I talked to a vice detective once about it, and I said, I would like to organize, maternity room nurses with vice cops, so that you could follow where these children are being taken and we could intervene at that point. And he says, well, like if you call me up and you say a child's in that crack house, I really can't go in unless, I have some evidence, and you're going to say that child's in a crack house, and I can go in and take the child. I don't even need to ask permission from my boss. I'm obligated to do that. If we did that, it would resolve a lot of problems with our children.
It makes so much sense when I hear you say it. It's mind-boggling that you need to be the one to suggest this, and that the people whose job it is to protect children are not thinking of it.
Well, and even I do speak to them about it. And I know there's pediatricians and other people who know about it. There's just no one to do it. And there's no funds to do it. And so it's not a priority. They'd rather, chase sex trafficking victims, which is more fun, and pimps, than to deal with a baby at the very front end of it. We made great inroads. I was part of the first Head Start program, and I thought we were really going to make progress there. It stopped there. There's not much before that.
Has social media affected life for child prostitutes?
It's affected life for everyone, for all kinds of kids, and put them in touch with people they shouldn't be in touch with. For child prostitutes, it just gives them another way to advertise. And many times what people don't really believe, or they don't understand, is that the pictures that are being run for, you can have this girl for $75. They don't even have that girl. It's just a picture that came from somewhere. So, yeah, social media is a problem, and we need to do something about that too. But so much money's being made. Money is the motivator that runs this country and makes the decisions for us, I'm afraid.
I noticed when I was a judge that the proliferation of gangs that are dominating many urban areas has really affected prostituted children.
Oh, they've taken everything away. The sweet talking pimps, we put most of them in jail. And then the ones that were left, the gangs just took them over. Because pimps didn't typically carry guns because it was an additional charge. Gang members carry guns. So no, you're either part of the gang, and there's nothing that makes me sadder than a poor woman who has children in one of those areas that's gang dominated, and that child has to go to school. There's nothing she can do. And she's afraid to come out of her house, and afraid to let her child out of the house, and the store owners and the schools, and everybody's terrified. And that's one of the areas we're focused on Figueroa Corridor with LAPD Southeast Division.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned going to school, because one of the things I really love about your organization is the focus on education. You try to do everything possible to help these young people get back into school so they can get a good education and become productive and successful members of society. Tell us why education is such a focal point for what you do.
It's the only way, it's the only permanent solution to prostitution. Prostitution is something that you can support yourself, and education is an economic alternative. And so our motto is from the streets to the boardroom. And I don't care if you're in a truck stop turning tricks with your pimp, and if you got a cell phone, if you will tutor your algebra, whatever it is you need to do for your 1 hour twice a week before you go out and turn tricks, we're making progress. And I'm with you all the way. And there's so much financial aid. It's so easy, to get them supported, to teach them, taking a child, from the streets and saying, let's go have lunch at the local community college. And they see people they've never seen before, and you have to help them dress because they don't have those clothes. They don't even know how to dress that way. You have to teach them different kinds of manners and things and how to behave. And you go sit in a classroom and they're going, this stuff's so easy. These people are so nice. So it's a real transformation. And we have an alumni board of directors who are made up of PhDs, bankers, therapists. One's an immediate responder. She's a firefighter in an oil refinery. It's very, very exciting. And they're the ones who are in charge of issuing the scholarships to our youth.
Do you have a way of measuring the success rate of your programs?
Yes. We do a follow-up survey every year of what are you doing now? And what else can we do for you? And and they can answer several different boxes. I'm married, I have kids, I'm in college, I'm in cosmetology school. And we have a 70 to 80% success rate. And I'm very excited about that.
Have you personally kept in touch with some of the young people that have come through your programs?
Yes. Yesterday, I just had lunch with a young woman who has a 12-year-old girl. Her husband has died, and she's, worried. She says she knows my whole life story. She's very, very smart. I made sure she gets A's in school. She says, but I'm just scared in terms of what's out there and what can happen. And I said, I'm more worried about you. Let's get you in school. Let's take her to a community college. Let's enroll. You have your GED. Let's enroll you both in, let's let her see the mom's going to college. Let's do the modeling so that she has something. You don't just tell them about it. You got to take them there. And so it's one of the cases that I'll have a personal interest in, and assigning caseworkers of what I want them to do.
Tell me about the work you've done internationally, teaching officials in other countries how to combat child sex trafficking.
Well, they're very angry at America because of the fact they say, where in the hell do you come up with your numbers? You have these PowerPoint presentations and so on and so forth. And we have a program here, an agency that American government, part of DOJ, that rates other countries at how they're doing with child prostitution. They're very intimidated by it. And in Thailand, for instance, they lowered their rating. And so the police officers went out and rounded up everybody in the restaurants that they thought was a prostitute and put them into a warehouse and did their DNA to find out how old they were. If they were 18, they went to jail. If they were under 18, then they were child prostitutes, and they did something else with them. And they did that to get their rating up with America. And I guess it's tied to funding that we may give them. They're very receptive to me. I've had some of them say, oh, I'm so excited you're here. DOJ's coming next week. I can't wait to tell them you're here first. And I met an interesting man who was a judge who set up classrooms for prostitutes to all become paralegals. And so I bought some computers for them and donated computers. And in a lot of Christian homes and NGOs take in these children, and they have rooms with computers for classrooms. And I go, well, where's your teachers? And they go, well, we're all volunteers, and the teacher will be back next week. And I said, I'm going to give you a teacher. We're going to do it through Zoom. And it's been very, very successful. The problem is people do not want to fund kids in foreign countries. So we've had to carry it on our backs with discretionary funds. It is in jeopardy now, and I'm very worried about it. And I know part of it is that they've given money to foreign countries, and they see like ministers or other people who can round up 200 kids, and then they think they keep the money, and I think they probably do. And they need to understand this is a program that we tutor from here under supervision from our headquarters, and our tutors are engineering students and very educated and accomplished people. They've taken kids in these programs and educated them and gotten their math skills up to where they can go into private boarding schools that their own countries pay for. And even though we only pay our tutors $20 an hour and most of them are part-time, they still think that's too much money to spend on those kinds of kids. I disagree. I've been there. We've been well received. My tutors come in sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning. And you should see the looks on the faces of these kids, and you can see some of it on our website.
Well, you've mentioned funding. Over the years, you've raised over $60 million to support your programs, which is just monumental. Where does Children of the Night get its funding from?
Mostly from grassroots. We're privately supported. I have, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your money comes from your big donors and 20% of your money comes from your small donors. So from social media, from churches, organizations, and I have some angels out there. I have some guardian angels, and I have people out there, some who want to remain anonymous. I just got a check at Christmas, from Fidelity Federal, and it's the same person every year. We never know what we're going to get. And here's $1 million for you, Lois. It's like, oh, how do you know what I'm thinking? So I couldn't do the work I do without those people. And it creates a problem because it makes it difficult for the government to impose regulations on me because I am privately supported. They can't threaten me with taking my money and can't do it. And I'm really good at making sure I meet all the regulations and taxes and audits and so on and so forth.
Well, I want people to know that they can donate to the organization by going to the website childrenofthenight.org. Tell me, Dr. Lee, if a parent watching this interview has concerns about their child being lured into the world of sex trafficking, what should they do?
They should call our hotline immediately. 1-800-551-1300, press 0. There's someone there, a case manager. It's not a hotline. It's not a referral line. There's someone there 24/7. And if it's something beyond what they can handle, they have direct communication with me. And these are not quick and dirty. Kids don't get involved in prostitution just overnight. They get involved, bad people maybe overnight. So it's a long-term process, but we're here to help, and it's what we do, and we enjoy doing it. So they should call. Do not get stuck in my email. So many people send me their emails and the long emails, and sometimes I'm a week behind, and I hate that. But there's nothing else I can do about it.
Well, I wanted to mention also one of the most interesting things that's ever happened in terms of your fundraising was when Richard Marx wrote his song Children of the Night, which was on his 1989 Repeat Offender album. And the proceeds from that song were donated to help build a 24-bed shelter. Have any other music artists done something like that?
Yes, Ronnie James Dio did the same thing. Ozzy Osbourne did the same thing. A group called Great White did the same thing. Richard Marx still contributes. I mean, he's family. And he also participates in fundraising events when necessary. And we've had a lot of people come forward to help. Johnny Carson was my biggest celebrity donor. It was quite, I heard him make a joke about, I was doing, education for prostitutes and trying to help them find alternative careers. He made a joke on a show, and I met an NBC publicist who said, I'm going to go meet him, and I'm not making you any promises. Give me your stuff. I'll put it in the stack. And the guy called me up and he said, it was unbelievable. He says, he goes, boom, 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 because he does everything fast. Grabbed yours. He said, I'm in this one. And he gave us millions of dollars. And he was really, we wrote a lot. We had a correspondence. He was concerned about the kids and what happened to so-and-so and what more could he do. I asked him once, could I use your name to lead our Heroes of the Heart campaign? And he said, if you think it'll help.
That is wonderful to hear about Johnny Carson.
Yes.
We recently had a guest on our show who was Johnny Carson's publicist, who did not have very nice things to say about him and said he was a very remote, cold man. So I'm very gratified to hear you say this.
He had a very small circle, and his personal secretary, Helen Sanders, was very, very close with him, and I was close with him. I could get him on the phone, but I think he had a close circle, and being with the kind of celebrity that he is, I think that's understandable.
So if people want to volunteer their services to help these victimized children, where should they go?
They should go to our website and look at volunteers. We're kind of limited to volunteers because we need professionals. We need doctors, dentists, a dermatologist to remove tattoos. We need hairdressers. We need, for graduation events and things like that. We need therapists, which we're willing to do through Zoom. I get a lot of requests from people who want to be therapists, and I say, okay, send me your license, send me your government ID, copy your malpractice insurance in the place where you receive patients, and you never hear from them again. It's the common person off the street does not get to come in and be a therapist to these very troubled children. I've always demanded my kids receive the best help available. This is not where you come play.
You're just an amazing human being. I've got to tell you, I can't resist asking you, what did you think of Kathleen Quinlan's portrayal of you in the 1985 TV movie Children of the Night?
I liked it. And Kathleen and I are very dear friends, and we're still continue to be friends. And she protected me because there were a lot of things they could have done with that role, and she wouldn't let them do it. And I really appreciate that. She's a great actress, and she got me, and right down to where I walk around and talk to myself.
So I have to ask you, having listened to the passion and all the expertise you've acquired and all the good you've done for people, why did you say that it's ruined your life?
Because I just think that there's in my mind, it's like maybe it would have been nice to be, a school teacher and have, more children and be involved in children's schools and live at the beach and do things like that. I have some regrets. I sacrificed a lot. I've never thought about it as a sacrifice, except now in recent years I have.
Well, I want to tell you something. There are two ways to change the world. One way is to do it one person at a time, and one way is to do it systemically. You've managed to do it both ways, and I think that's remarkable.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you. That means something to me.
I want to thank you so much for all the work you and everyone at Children of the Night have been doing to help our most vulnerable children. I hope everyone watching will donate to your organization and get involved at the local level to help these kids in whatever way we can. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for taking the time to appear on our show.
My pleasure.
Our guest has been Dr. Lois Lee, founder and president of Children of the Night, a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating child sex trafficking. Please check out the website, childrenofthenight.org, and donate what you can to this critically important organization helping our most vulnerable children. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Deborah Batsafin, my production assistant, Rosa Puzo, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. And a very special thank you to my dear friends, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli, for facilitating this interview. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.